Hello everybody, welcome to What Culture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Josh, my friend, Red Dead 3's a thing.
Yeah, if you're not sick of talking about GTA 6, which may or may not exist,
Not
we're going to
today.
talk about a project
no.
even further flung, because going off quotes from Take-Two's Strauss Zelnick and a few insiders, it seems like Red Dead Redemption 3 is inevitable. Let's start with the insiders. This was written up by Insider Gaming because a leaker by the name of My Time to Shine H pretty much just tweeted out that Red Dead Redemption 3 is in development.
Okay.
And they are a known movie leaker, according to Insider Gaming, who haven't dabbled too much in video games as of yet, but seem to be pretty reliable in terms of the stuff they've announced so far. Hilariously, the Insider Gaming report mentions that this game probably won't come out for at least 6 or 7 years, which for me, that's very optimistic, I would say, especially considering we still don't know when GTA 6 is coming out. But before I get into what Strauss Zelnick has been saying about the franchise, does more Red Dead tickle your pickle?
I can't even get to the idea of tickling the old pickle because I can't think of how they're going to do this. Like, Red Dead Redemption 2, and you can watch, I did a whole video on how Red Dead Redemption 2 was about the death of Rockstar. It's very much, at least to me, about the death of the internal attitude that was at the heart of Rockstar and why they were able to go on that incredible run across the 2000s and the beginning of the 2010s. And that, leads into the fact that a lot of the key staff have left Rockstar. Dan Howes has left, Laszlo Jones, Leslie Benzies. Rockstar is not Rockstar anymore.
Yeah.
And they're not the team that made Red Dead 1 or 2. And so that's kind of my thing with GTA 6, is that I just don't know how you get that over the finish line. So I don't know how the hell you get another Red Dead over the finish line when that game, especially Red Dead Redemption 2, felt so much like the brain of Dan Houser, sort of like writ large, the death of lawlessness, having to address the new world and all things like that. I don't know. I can't.
Well,
I don't know what they would do for this.
Well, the thing is, we're going to get it whether we like it or not, because even if the leak is wrong and it's not in active development right now, Take-Two has confirmed that Red Dead Redemption, as they view it, is essentially an eternal franchise for them, up with GTA, something that is going to go on forever. This was written up by VGC, who transcribed, at least in part, an interview that Strauss Zelnick did with the Jefferies Virtual Global Interactive Entertainment Conference. I imagine it was a conference that happened the other week.
Where all the Jefferies are.
There, the CEO was talking about the franchises that Take-Two have and which ones are going to be around forever, essentially. He even described the optimum franchise as being James Bond. Obviously, something which has had a bunch of sequels and has existed for decades and decades and decades. I suppose in terms of franchises, at least in movies, and James Bond is the longest running, I think, or maybe the most prolific at the very least. It doesn't die. It survives changes in leadership. It survives changes in casting. It is kind of eternal. He said during this conference, quote, "You would like every franchise to be James Bond. There are precious few entertainment franchises of any sort that fall into that category, but they do exist. And I think GTA is one of them. I think Red Dead is one of them. NBA is obviously one of them as well, because basketball will always continue to exist." That's what he had to say. So, according to him, Red Dead is up there with GTA and is definitely going to happen, whether that's, in development right now. We are getting Red Dead 3. We are probably going to get Red Dead 4. They are probably going to keep making Red Dead games after I'm dead.
The soul of the IP will assumedly be drained out of it over time, but that'll be the whole thing of how much of what makes up Red Dead do you want from these subsequent sequels. Is it just the way that it plays? Is it just the idea of a Wild West game or an Old West game? Is that enough? And I think we're going to go through the whole Assassin's Creed cycle with Red Dead, or with all of the franchises underneath their umbrella, including GTA. It is interesting overall because just this year you had Final Fantasy creator Square Enix saying that Final Fantasy could be anything, that it was so malleable that it can be this giant brand. Obviously the sales, the reception of Final Fantasy 16 not being as strong as they could have been kind of proved that wrong, at least I would say it did, and I loved 16. But you've also got that, you've got Assassin's Creed being very malleable, them trying various different gameplay mechanics and everything with it in different formula, and then going back to the traditional feel of it again. I feel like where we are in entertainment history, especially in gaming history, you have these big monolithic franchises that make more than ever, unit cost wise. Games always make more than other mediums, and you're just seeing these publishers just kind of address that fact and just say are we building brands for the rest of time right now? They certainly want to. Assassin's Creed won't die, and there's a tepid excitement for Mirage right now because they're going back to basics.
I think it's interesting with the comments here, because later on in this transcript, which again over on VGC, he's talking about the difference between annualized franchises versus the likes of GTA and Red Dead Redemption and other Take-Two properties, where he does kind of like stress, similarly to when he was talking about GTA 6 when GTA 5 was like in its boom period. I mean, I suppose that's all the time, but there definitely was a peak where he was talking about how people need to miss the franchise a little bit before it kind of comes back. And he is talking about like trying to keep that quality high, trying to not oversaturate the market with too many Red Deads or too many GTAs, you know, taking that time with development. So to me, while I totally understand the Assassin's Creed comparison, to me I'd probably compare it more to Elder Scrolls or Fallout, you know, the stuff that Bethesda's making, where we're always going to get Elder Scrolls, we're always going to get Fallout, but it's going to be many, many years between those installments because those games are just so big, they take so many years to develop. Like, I probably won't get another Fallout from Bethesda until I'm like 40 or something.
Todd Howard was saying he doesn't know how many more he's got in him.
Yeah.
Because he's got like maybe 2 more games. And the amount of time it takes to turn those things around, he himself addressed his own immortality when it came to game development time, which is another thing that kind of ties into the gaming history side of it, where, you know, we talk about long-standing brands and franchises and going forward. Mario is a big one. There's a whole thing doing the rounds at the minute with Super Mario Wonder that, you know, the most recent Mario, that game's development, they weren't given a deadline. They were just told, make a new Mario, take as long as you want. And it's Mario, it doesn't matter. We're not hitting some specific, you know, hype window. It's Mario, it'll work regardless. Mario feels like the kind of one that'll last the test of time. Same with Zelda. Nintendo have 2 of them, I would say, right now, that are Bondian level.
I was going to say, you can kind of say that Mario is the Bond of the video game universe, and that would be mad outside of this context.
He can wear a suit in Mario Odyssey.
That's a great point. Nintendo have nailed that with at least those 2 franchises and probably more, but they are definitely on the level, I think, that other studios are trying to chase, and, you know, in terms of keeping them relevant, in terms of keeping them pushing the medium forward and maintaining that quality as well as popularity.
Yeah, but the thing I was going to say is that with Mario, you have Shigeru Miyamoto, you have the original creators who set those things in motion. We're approaching a time across the sort of next 10, 15, 20 years where a lot of those creators are either going to be stepping down or will pass away or whatever, and there'll be a changing of the guard. There'll be a handing down of you know, how the brand Bible, how to make this franchise work to a new team. Rockstar have obviously done that already internally, assumedly. They've handed things over to whoever's carrying the torch for GTA, Red Dead, without the Housers. Sam Houser's still there, but Dan Houser, being one of the lead writers, isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
So I just think that's fascinating. How do you maintain this? How do you make that work? I kind of liken it to some sort of legacy bands in music. Like, it's that whole thing of like, once they're done, they're done. No one's taking on the mantle of Iron Maiden or whatever, even though Bruce Dickinson's son is touring with his own band or something. Some things do need to end. And I think that it's interesting where we are in gaming, because we're at a point in time where these franchises are, you know, this is the point where we need to address this.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that, because I hadn't thought about it in that way. Obviously, the Nintendo products, like you mentioned, have had like long-serving producers who've overseen the entirety of that franchise. And even Bond, in a movie context, to my knowledge, has pretty much had the same producers who are in charge of that brand, who, you know, work to find the next story, the next filmmakers, the next James Bond, and have kind of overseen it and have at least had the passing of the torch and have had that kind of control. Yeah, but we've seen other franchises like Assassin's Creed that have kind of been in flux, that kind of exist as a brand but don't have that creative spearhead overseeing it and keeping it on track. That's going to be fascinating. Just generally, I suppose you kind of mentioned it earlier, like, what do you even want to see from the next Red Dead?
I want it to mean something. I think that I loved how much Red Dead 2 meant. I didn't love the way that parts of it played. It was very leaden. It was very like weighty, obviously intentionally, and it felt the nearest thing to a virtual reality experience of just living in the Old West that you could get without goggles. I thought it was so good at atmosphere. It is interesting how many people didn't finish it. When you look at the trophy data, the achievement data, people just did not get through that game. But there's so much there. And like I said, encapsulatively, it is, at least to me, all about the death of the sort of lawlessness, or the death of risk-taking or boundary pushing that we saw in the 90s across the 2000s that Rockstar thrived on. That's what GTA was born from. And I loved Red Dead 2 being a swan song for that team, for the general approach to game design and everything else. So I don't know what Red Dead 3 can represent. Maybe it needs to represent the idea of new life in the Old West. I just don't know whether they go further back or not.
I think they've got to, right?
They're going backwards already anyway.
Because even like you said there, with the sort of metaphorical implications of the time period where Red Dead 2 and Red Dead 1 is set, like even in the text itself, it's about the end of the Old West,
Yeah.
like literally, like that era is coming to an end. We're seeing a lot of like the modern age sort of come to fruition, and I don't think you could do a sequel to Red Dead 1, otherwise you'd kind of be retreading like the same ground. So yeah, do you go even further back, do a prequel to Red Dead 2? Do you follow the same characters? Like, I personally, as much as I love those characters, almost don't want to know any more about them, especially because their arcs now feel so good, feel so complete in a lot of ways, even though there is a lot of time unaccounted for and a lot of stuff you could play. I kind of want to see them go a bit further back, but maybe, you know...
Give me Landon Ricketts.
Yeah, jump into another gang, jump into another character, maybe hear about like the Van der Linde gang like on the periphery, like hear what they're doing, kind of like how you hear about like Nico Bellic in GTA 5 or something, but separate it from the two games that we have, which I think are kind of perfect, tell an amazing story that means something like you mentioned, and kind of do something completely new. But it's in and of itself, that's kind of scary.
The thing is, like, Red Dead 2, like, because it was about the death of the Old West, the death of, you can argue, the death of the Red Dead brand as they saw it at the time. Like I said, those staff have left. It reminds me of what Ken Levine did when he was exiting Bioshock, like Bioshock Infinite.
Yeah.
Wrapped that story in a way that just said, look, there'll always be a lighthouse, there'll always be a book, there'll always be a person, or whatever. This will go on infinitely, addressing the corporate reality of you'll probably get more Bioshocks, which we are going to get, but not including Ken Levine and not including the core minds that birthed it in the first place. I feel like Dan Houser's handing this over.
Hilariously, in that same report by Strauss Zelnick, he did say that Bioshock could be one of these franchises one day.
Nailed
if
it.
The quality remains high. Like you said, Ken Levine
Nailed
sort
it.
of preempted that with the sort of monomithy kind of establishment.
We'll see you in 10 years for Bioshock 40 or whatever the hell.
Absolutely will be. Hey, Bioshock 4 needs to go out first.
I think it eventually gets over the finish line. But let us know what you think down in the comments below of Red Dead Redemption 3. What do you actually want to see from it? And what's your thoughts on Rockstar in general going into this? For now, I've been Scott from McCulture.com.
Let's take a bet before we sign out.
Okay.
What is coming out first, Elder Scrolls 6 or Red Dead 3?
Elder Scrolls 6.
Do you reckon?
Yeah. Because at least Todd Howard's still there. So you've still got like someone who actually wants to make the game on staff.
Yeah.
That's more than what Rockstar have.
We'll check in 15 years to see who was right. I'm gonna go Red Dead.
We will get there. I've been Scott from McCulture.com.
I mean Josh from McCulture.com.
Goodbye.
Bye.